Welcome
Hello,
to South
hello.
Asians in Sports. Today we are doing a fireside chat with Anesh Madani. Really excited. Just so you know, my name is Neha Uberoi Kangura. I'm the CEO and founder of South Asians in Sports. We are a network of sports industry professionals worldwide. The organization is based in the US. We're a nonprofit. We have about 650 members globally, people ranging from executives to students and everywhere in between, all thriving or looking to make a career in sports. Part of the mission for us at SAIS is to advocate for, educate, and inspire people to work in sports from South Asian backgrounds. And we do this through fireside chats like this, networking opportunities, mentorship opportunities, and being a community and resource for everyone to come together and share knowledge as well as opportunities. So really excited for today. We're going to be talking to Anesh Madani about his career, his trajectory to where he is today. And if you have questions you want to ask, if you could keep writing them in the chat box. Devyani, who's volunteering for us today, will be kind of selecting a few at the end. And Anesh is also spending a little more time with us potentially at the end to answer questions. So please keep those questions coming in the comments. And when we're kind of done with our discussion, we'll hand it over to all of you who are watching to ask whatever burning questions you may have. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Anesh Madani. Welcome. Thank you for being here today with us. Just
Thanks for
wanted to
having me,
give
Neha.
everyone a brief background as to who you are. For those of you who don't know, he is currently the head of global digital partnerships and social media for the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, and he's based in Switzerland. Not an easy job right now. So thank you so much for being with us this crazy time. I really appreciate it. I also wanted to say that, before the IOC, Anesh worked for 5 years at Twitter. He joined kind of the founding team in India, and he eventually headed their sports partnerships for the entire Asia Pacific region. And I think what's really cool is that, well, Anesh will tell you in his own words, but his kind of roots came from wanting to be a commentator and reporter and kind of working his way, navigating his way up to where he is today. What's also really cool is that Anesh is on the World Economic Forum, and he's kind of trying to make changes in how we consume digital media, what that means for us, and I want to kind of talk to him about that at the end as well. Anesh, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Neha. That was really sweet.
I think when we see your name, when we see your title, we think, wow, this guy's living the dream. I mean, I think he's made it to the top of sports. I mean, this is huge. Can you tell us a little bit about, your sort of trajectory of your career? How did you catch that sports bug, and why did you choose to go down this route?
Yeah, no, for sure. We're talking about living the dream. I'm literally thinking back to like exactly 10 years ago now, when a friend and I had like a big adventure to actually go watch India win the Cricket World Cup in Bombay in the final. Story for another time. But I was just like, as you were thinking or talking about like living the dream, it just felt like there are moments in time where things just get started and then you never know what happens. So it's fun to look back in life. I think sometimes 10 years at a time. I think personally, how I got into this space, it's funny. Like I think growing up, I grew up in Hyderabad in India, and ended up watching a lot of sports growing up, and nobody else in my family did, strangely enough. And while I was doing that, Harsha Bhogle, the cricket commentator, actually happened to be from my high school in Hyderabad, right? So there was this whole connection to seeing someone do what you at that time thought was was the ideal thing to do, right? Like get paid to talk about sport, travel the world,
Right.
watch sport in the settings that he was doing. So I think it just took on a life of its own. Just sort of actively played a bit in school, followed, read, and watched a little bit. So as I was finishing up high school, I just happened to take some time and actually just applied to be like a cub journalist at a local newspaper and went around, like started covering like stories of local athletes. And I still remember the first one. There's this BMX motocross 14-year-old who drive like these BMX bikes, but his feet couldn't touch the ground, right? Like, so it was just really interesting to like go around and do a bit of that. And while I was doing that, there was actually an audition that ESPN was doing at the time for to find the next Harsha Bhogle, or I think it was called Harsha Khoj at that time. So naive 18-year-old me went and just auditioned for some of that, had some fun, made it to a couple of levels, and then that eventually petered out. But all of those things, kind of one after another, led at some point to uh, when the IPL started out in India in third season, the IPL franchise Royal Challengers Bangalore was looking for what they called back then the chief blogger for the team. So it was like, oh, this is fascinating. Like you can live and travel with the team for an entire season, and then just get like write about that and live with your heroes. So that's where a lot of this started in 2010, where there was this national contest, happened to win that, went and traveled with the team for a full season, met a bunch of people in the industry, and yeah, things really took off. And it's funny. I can see Rishi Jaitley is here in the comments, and he's hiding there somewhere in the in the chat. But I'll give him a shout out. When Rishi and I first met, when he came to launch Twitter in India, that's where a lot of this exciting work started. So shout out to Rishi. There's a lot more to share.
Anish, you talk about, this fun things like traveling with the cricket team, blogging, joining Twitter. What did your family make of this sort of relatively new kind of career path? And what were the hurdles you had to overcome being a South Asian, living in India? What was
Yeah.
that conversation like at home?
Yeah. I think I got lucky because I think my elder brother got all the all the typical pressure. So I think by the time they came to my parents were pretty relaxed. It was a fun time, right? Like getting into the industry. It's also helped by the fact that there were new opportunities at the time. So while it may not have been, even the blogging stint at Royal Challengers Bangalore, which is for a season, and I actually went and started out in advertising in Bombay. And what happened was that a year and a half into that role, there was a new field hockey league that was coming up, and so we were pitching for that account. So I raised my hand and said, "Oh, cool! I'd love to do this." And so in the course of those conversations, it ended up that they were really excited by the pitch and said, "Do you want to work here instead?" And so I ended up with a bit of a lucky break, let's call it that way, at a time when everyone was like, "Oh my God, what are you going to do with this particular opportunity?" And I just gave it a go because it was early on in my career. I think I had the freedom to take that risk at the time, and it worked out because really it came down to being able to work with people that cared about you, and so one thing led to another from there. So I guess that's part of the secret, right? Like you have to have
So
people
we
that are
owe a
willing to
lot.
shape the path.
Yeah. So we owe a lot to your bigger brother for being the doctor slash engineer so that
For sure.
you could be a blogger for a while. So tell us about what you did at Twitter and how that launched you into your role right now at the IOC. Can you tell us a little bit about that 5 years you spent and what were you thinking about when you started with Twitter and, kind of down the line saying, this is what I want my career to look like? Or did you have those conversations? How did you map this out for yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, a really fun story, right? So I think I started out on Twitter as a user because I just wanted to follow some writers that I admired, and one of them happened to be Siddharth Vaidyanathan, who's also based in the US now and a cricket writer back then. So just started out, used the platform, really enjoyed it, and while I was at Neo Sports, a television broadcast network in India, I happened to meet Rishi on the day that Roger Federer joined Twitter. Okay, I'm a big tennis fan, big Federer fan, and so Rishi literally after we caught up was like, "Hey, look who's just joined Twitter," and it was like it was Federer, and we um, we ended up having a really good conversation, got the role, and it was super exciting because my first project at Twitter was Sachin Tendulkar's retirement, right? So we were very lucky to work on this this project back then. It was called hashtag Thank You Sachin, where people could tweet to BCCI with hashtag Thank You Sachin and get like uh, a an autographed auto reply, which we worked with the team on, and she kind of led. So it was great. So when we started, it was all about thinking of like how do we help people in India have this amazing experience on this platform? And so it was all about looking at who are the leaders in the country, what is exciting for people to follow, what interests could we build up. And so we spent a lot of time with leagues and teams and athletes and build that whole roadmap out. So all in all, it wasn't. I'd say you're clever in hindsight, right? Like I think back then we were just having fun building this out at Twitter, and then that led to it being a space in which we could help some of our partners monetize their presence on the platform. That led into more interesting things and a larger geography. And that's through the course of my time meeting a bunch of partners who are all excited to work with Twitter, and specifically in India as well. Happened to meet the Olympics at one of those places, and that's how this worked out.
Okay, cool. It sounds like your time at Twitter was very creative, almost entrepreneurial. At least it sounds like, you were a small team, kind of trying new things, working with really, really big celebrities. And now you're at the IOC. We'll talk about what you actually do, but what is that like for you going from one culture to a very different culture? Not just in a work environment or career wise, but also for you, coming from India to Switzerland. Can you talk about kind of both of those things?
Yeah, for sure. Culture-wise, I think we have so much fun at Twitter that one of my goals was definitely to see how I could bring a lot of that into this role as well. And I'll speak to that a little later in terms of like what I really enjoy about the team today, and how we do a few things. So I do think that I was in a really good headspace to be able to, you know, step out anywhere, explore any opportunity, and this came out of the blue, which is great because I had to make a quick decision on what to do, and it just seemed really exciting at the time. Taking your life to a completely different part of the world, and I think even the India to Switzerland shift was one that I thought about and said, like this would be a great time to do it because I spent almost a decade in Bombay, really enjoyed it, still do. If I Whenever I go back to the city, I'm actually in Bombay right now. Um, but but I was ready for an adventure. So Switzerland with Tokyo coming up and Beijing coming up seemed like a really exciting thing to do. So culturally, I don't think it was as much of a challenge because we had a really multinational fun crew, even at Twitter, all around the world. So we spent a lot of time meeting them in person pre-pandemic, and yeah, just being ready to step outside somewhere.
Awesome. So can we talk a little bit more about your role currently at the IOC? Can you explain to us, for those of us who are dreaming of kind of following in your footsteps, who are really interested in sports business side of sports, what do you actually do day to day? What is the overall objective? And sort of, what are the challenges, the biggest challenges that you are facing right now?
Yeah, 100%. The So my role is I get to I get to have all the fun with third-party technology platforms, right? Like partners, um, uh, where essentially you look at Google, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and of course, in some other parts of the world, other regional platforms that we may work with, where I'm responsible for what we do with them, both commercially, but also with the social media team, thinking through how we nurture our communities around the world, right? So there's the universality of the Olympics obviously makes this really, really interesting because you're looking at people all around the world that care about it. And so on a day-to-day basis, what my life looks like is a combination of um, constant conversation with technology platforms, right? Understanding where their product's going, where their business is going, what we could be doing together that is meaningful for people around the world who care about our brand, and then a ton of conversations internally as well about how does the Olympic brand behave in the 21st century. So there's a lot of there's a lot of excitement also because we have a super diverse team from around the world in one office. So that adds to the fun.
I think you mentioned you have something like 55 nationalities working together in this office in Switzerland, right?
Yeah.
How is being Indian, or how has being Indian aided you in your career or in this particular role?
Yeah. I think in this particular role, it's really been an opportunity to you know have conversations about things that you may not have had in your own country as much, right? So I definitely think there's a generous dose of like cricket nach kana khana that comes into play. Like last year, for instance, during the summer, we just started going out and playing some cricket in the garden next to the office, right? And you'd have a lot of people just curious coming out to play, building out those conversations. I think one of the definite um, advantages has been that you grow up, I guess, naturally cosmopolitan in some ways, right? You're just consuming um, culture and entertainment and sports and language from around the world. So that does play into being able to share not just what people are interested or curious about from a cultural perspective, but also that you have the opportunity to really showcase to them what's going on a completely different side of the world where they may or may not have as much experience.
And has that been a clear asset to you in your career thus far, that knowledge base of that cultural awareness?
Yeah, 100%. I think that one, just like this community, we're really blessed to have, uh, I guess, people everywhere, potentially family connections in different parts of the world. So you have a reason to also care. I remember when a bunch of friends of mine from college went to study in the US, right? Suddenly, all you knew everything about like college football, which typically wouldn't be something you either consumed or was part of your cultural diet. And so I think that it does play a role in being more open, in just being excited to even potentially go where the opportunities are, right? That was a big part of being able to say, oh cool, I'd love to go check out Switzerland and live there and see what that's like. And funnily enough, when I first moved to Switzerland, I already had a couple of friends there who studied there and were working in a football federation club there. So you're never too far from people. And it also turned out that there was a family friend literally in Lausanne who'd moved there like 3 years ago. So I think that there is definitely there are definitely some advantages to being South Asian in that sense.
That's really important to hear because, a lot of times, a lot of the South Asians in North America, we can often feel like, sports are not the norm for us. Sports business isn't the norm. And it can often feel like our background is a disadvantage. So hearing that, you can be flexible, you have that kind of cosmopolitan viewpoint, and that you can bring, certain different perspectives into an organization, I think it is a great asset. With that kind of leads me to my next question, which is how can we create more Anish Madanis in the world? I mean, I think you mentioned you're the only Indian from India at the IOC, right? Hired by the IOC. What should professionals be doing, entry level, mid career? What are the skill sets we should be acquiring to kind of give us that competitive advantage?
Yeah, think most important thing is that you've got to live your own story, right? I don't think you have similar paths because I think I can only look back in hindsight and say that some of this worked out because I did this, and this.
Right.
That's probably not, there's definitely a generous dose of serendipity mixed with persistence and and relationships that led you to different places. But I do think that if you're starting out in this world right now, the openness uh, to being around the industry, I think is an important one because you can think of the industry as being in technology and creating really interesting things for sports or a whole host of other things that play to your strengths, right? I think one of the things I definitely remember from a conversation with a mentor many years ago was he actually asked, "Tell me something you've been doing for a long time without being asked to do it." And then he said, "Oh, I don't know what I was doing growing up." And so he happened to talk about the fact that there was a lot of sports that was in my life, whether it was like reading, writing, playing, sort of consuming it. And he said, "Well, if you choose to go down this path, you have a 15-year head start on a bunch of other people. And and more importantly, you may always be willing to learn or just be curious to learn, right? So having a really deep interest in one area doesn't preclude you from taking advantage of other strengths. And ideally, you want to bring those two or three things together and then start learning more about it. So that's how, for me now in hindsight, I look at it and say, well, I started out with a team, ended up at a league, and then a broadcast network, then a technology platform, and now a rights owner, right? And none of it was necessarily planned. I couldn't have scripted this even if I wanted to. So I do think that there is, when you're starting out, an openness to doing something that you've already invested a lot of time in doing, and then figuring out how that connects to the industry would be a great place to go. And then I think if you're further along, which I definitely feel like right now, you almost wake up sometimes and you're like, well, this is still surreal, right? Like, how do you get to work in an industry and do this for your living? And there, I think there's a lot more space about giving as good as you get, because it really is fulfilling to have conversations across the board with people who may be starting out, people who are much, much further along their career. And honestly, I find that being in an industry like this, that's part of the charm, right? You meet like really, really interesting people, experiences that they've had around the world, especially a bunch of people in the friends in the sports industry who've been potentially on the broadcast side or others, like literally traveling around the world, like, building this out and showcasing sport, or even like yourself, Neha, right? Like, if you're actually playing the sport, then hopefully that has some charm too. So I would say those are a couple of things to really be maybe thoughtful about. Just being open and giving as good as you get.
It's funny hearing you speak for the last 20 minutes or so. I didn't really hear you talking about hard skills. I knew analytics the best. I knew this the best. I knew how to do partnerships the best. How much has networking or those soft skills helped you into where you are right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think about them as like building really deep relationships, right, over a period of time. And of course, we live in an era where it's easier to get started, right? You can have loose social connections that can evolve into something more meaningful. And so today the barrier to being able to reach out to someone is much lower. I think for me personally, it was a case that I just really enjoyed, being around people or just hosting people. I think one of the fun stories from back at my time at Twitter was being able to host the team from Wimbledon at a dinner in Bombay, right? And you just you what you learn from maybe spending a couple of hours over dinner with someone is probably really helpful to focus you and go and do your hard skills even better during the day, right? But it's almost the sort of fuel that can drive you, and it's just something that you know you look at yourself and your strengths and see in what ways would that make sense. If you're a great writer and you enjoy just going back and forth with people, that could be incredibly meaningful. I have so many people that uh, just wrote like thoughtful personal emails over the years, and we've never even met sometimes, but you have a connection with them because of how clearly you can see them think. And so it can be a combination of things, but you do want to take a deep interest in people, and then hopefully reach out. And honestly, sometimes it literally takes one person to change your life.
Right. Anish, just to kind of to switch gears, you are part of the World Economic Forum. Can you tell me your exact title there and what you are tasked with doing?
Sure. So at the World Economic Forum, they have what are called the Global Future Councils. Right? So the Global Future Councils are across a range of areas, and our area is media, entertainment, and sport. So there's a group of about, I'd say, 30 leaders around the world from the media, entertainment, and sports industry that come together to think through, uh, uh, you know, things that are going to be important for the industry, like years into the future. And how do you start, um, you know, working with all kinds of stakeholders to actually move some of those things forward. So, as an example, this year on the forum, we're thinking through social cohesion through sport and play, for instance, right? Part of being, the world being in a pandemic. How do you use the power of sport, the power of play to think about, the next decade and what that will look like in a post-pandemic world. So there's a lot of blue sky thinking, really interesting group of people to work with and understand how you can help that kind of agenda be furthered along. So there's a lot of really interesting, meaningful discussions, which may then lead to actions and outcomes that we'll be building out over the next few months.
Very cool. And how
Yeah.
does all of this sort of tie into your professional or your personal goals? Can you tell us a little bit about what you might be thinking about next 5 years or next 10 years?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was thinking about it after we chatted as well, Neha, and it's honestly after the year that we've had, it's so hard to tell. I think I'm almost like at this point grateful to take it a day at a time, and also having seen what's happened in the last few years in my own career, almost welcome the serendipity, right? So you want to, I mean, at a personal and professional level, of course, there's you at a personal level, of course, I'd love to have to get to a place where you can be spending most of your time on doing the things that you want to be doing, which is what I'm very lucky to do right now. So I think that if I can continue to do that, spending most of my time doing something I like, that would be a great personal goal. And then professionally, I think it's just after having gotten to the Olympics, uh, it's thinking about how can this start. It's a lot of the mindset now is about like the giving and getting piece, where you look at interesting people around the world and what they could be doing in different places. So like thinking through that, a lot of leadership roles now. We're hiring a bunch on our teams in for the upcoming Olympics. So thinking through like opportunities and actually just being able to spend time with really interesting people in your professional life. I think that makes up for a lot, right? So professionally, if it had to be like a really simple goal, it would be to like spend your time with people who are smarter than you, and you can learn from. So then every day is more fun than anything you can plan for the future.
Nice. Beautiful. I wanted to ask you again what you talked about. You said taking it day by day, especially after the last year and a half that we've had. And, with the work that you're doing with the IOC right now, can you give us a little insight as to what that is like for you right now? You must have so many different strategies depending on kind of what's going to be happening in the next few months. Can you kind of talk us through what that's like?
Yeah, I think, if I have to speak about it broadly right now with the team, what's most important is that, we have a shared mission, right, on the team, and then you're sort of making sure that everyone's feeling good about coming to work every day, and being able to, like, power through the situation that we are in right now. So I think we have this fun thing on the team, called the socials, where sometimes on Fridays you can get the teams together with other teams that may or may not be within the organization, right? So almost like mixers in a pre-pandemic world, but just done virtually, for instance. So there's definitely that aspect to it, which is on a day-to-day basis, making sure that you're there for people, and you're doing a combination of, like, planning a lot of strategies, but also being agile enough to react to opportunities. And so it is it's a bit of a strange time to be in, let's put it that way.
Definitely. But you're doing it with a smile on your face.
Yes.
That's important.
So yeah.
Anesh, thank you. Those are sort of the general questions I had. I think the group have some questions for sure. I'm going to ask Divyani to kind of step in and help moderate questions. Either have people ask you directly or we read them out. Divyani, are you there? Do you want to kind of step in and either read the questions out or have people, I guess, raise their hand or unmute their mics for the questions?
Sure. So we already have one question. So if Venu can ask the question to Anesh.
Hey, Anesh. Hi, Venu here.
Hey, Venu.
Hi. So really interesting hearing your story. Thanks for that. So I mean, it's a bit of a question that I'm currently, working on in terms of the project that I'm doing. So from a digital fan engagement perspective, right, we've seen sports, evolve a lot in the last few years, and especially now with COVID. Whatever happened in the last 1 year, it's completely different, right? So at Twitter, are you guys doing something for the sports industry in terms of, or even with IOC on a digital fan engagement perspective? Is there some new technology or something new as an initiative that you're going to come up with?
There's a lot to work. I wish I could share as much with you, Venu, but I'm personally very excited about it. Right? Like there's a ton of things that we're definitely working on right now that feel like you're living a bit in the future. I think we have, it's been really exciting over the last couple of years that I've been here. We've experimented with a whole host of things. I think one example that comes to mind was, in July 2020, we were celebrating a year to go for the Olympics, and we actually built what is called a Twitter emoji engine, where people could tweet with hashtag stronger together and and an emoji, and we would like auto respond with like great moments from like past Summer Olympics, right? So a lot of it is just, I guess, even delighting one person or making one person smile, like on any given day, which is sort of one way of looking at like fan engagement, because that's the question you always have, right? Like, what does engagement even mean? And if it comes down to somebody reacting, I remember that we were showcasing the engine to someone who was Finnish, and when he tweeted, he actually got the moments back from Helsinki 1952, right? The moment when the torch was lit there. I was totally unexpected. And I was like, yes, I totally worked with the algorithm to make sure that he got that moment. But it's moments like those which really stand out. So I think that could be one way to think about it. Is in the engagement initiatives that we're doing. There's a lot of incredible stories, especially of Olympian athletes from around the world. So as we share those stories or bring them to life in using technology in interesting ways, if we can put a smile on someone's face, then that's a good day.
Interesting. Thanks a lot, Anish.
Zay, you can ask your question.
Awesome, thanks. Hi, Anesh. Thank you for talking today. I really enjoyed this so far. I'm a student studying sport management at the University of Michigan. I'm currently a sophomore, and I'm just wondering if you have any advice that you would give yourself when you were a student, maybe coming up in the industry, that you learn now and could pass on.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Zay. It's so hard to tell, honestly, right? Especially when you're like, so many years in. But I can share maybe one experience from my time back in college. So, I happened to go on exchange when I was doing my master's to Singapore, and ended up meeting a professor of sports marketing who was like really passionate about what he did. So it was like, I think like literally one conversation with him that sparked off this interest to say, oh, like, why don't we have this back where I'm studying, you know? And so when I went back from exchange, I literally pitched a sports marketing course to be added to the curriculum to the director of the institute, right? And then there was like another professor who was willing to help back then. And essentially what happened by proxy was that we had to make this thing interesting. And as we were brainstorming about this, we ended up with a course where you had a lot of industry leaders come onto campus to actually spend time with the students and sort of take them through what they've learned. And so it ended up becoming one of the most popular electives on campus. But personally, I ended up meeting like really interesting people from the industry because I was curious about having that be. And 10 years on, I think it's still one of the most popular electives on campus there. So sometimes you don't realize what could be getting kicked off. And so I think from an advice perspective, it's probably if you were planning to start something or if you had like a really deep interest in one area, could you get your, I don't know, college or institution behind that idea in some way, shape, or form that gives you perhaps even a platform to do things that could play out in the longer term? Because I know that even many years later, some of those relationships with those industry leaders is in a really different place because they knew me when I was a student trying to put something together.
Awesome, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Damin, you can ask your question next. Are you there, Damin? Or can I just read out your question? So I'll just read out. So his question was, since you work for an international sports organization, he was wondering if there are times your jobs have any kind of political implications.
I think we have, there's a lot of implications for a lot of things that you do in your roles. And so the way we approach it is that it's helpful to have teams with diverse perspectives. So right now on my team, there are about 9 different nationalities. We speak multiple languages, and so a lot about working in organizations like these is just getting ahead of things you can potentially see coming. And so what we want to be doing, of course, is to Venu's earlier question, like building really delightful experiences for people all around the world. That's where a lot of the focus is. And then you have a lot of leaders within the organization that have significant experience in looking at a lot of this and being able to guide us there. So yes, there are implications to all the things that we could potentially be doing, but we also, I think, try and work towards making sure that there are ways in which you can get ahead of a lot of that.
Arijit, you can ask your question.
Hello, Neha. Hello, Anish. Thanks for having Anish today here. So I am one of his footstep followers. I've been following him in Instagram and Twitter for a long time. And the as you said, my spark came into sports like after looking into your work and to be in an Olympic committee. So my question is, so having following International Olympic Committee and Paralympic for many years, and I've noticed that like they have been like organizing and hosting events together. But I feel that like only the Olympic is being promoted. Like for example, in Olympic channel, rather than promoting a Paralympic, only the Olympic sport is being promoted. So is there a way like where they jointly promote together?
Good question, Ajit. Look, there are organizations that obviously the games come together at a certain time, happening jointly at that time. So there's a lot of work that obviously goes behind the scenes in building these organizations together. I obviously can't speak specifically to some of some of what you just talked about, but you'll see that there's a whole host going on where especially on digital platforms they can come together in really simple, interesting ways that that do feel like there's a lot more going on between these organizations.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hi, John, you're next to ask the question.
All right, thank you. Well, Anish, nice to meet you. My name is JC Kim. I teach sports management at Fairleigh Dickinson University in New Jersey. Uh, it is very interesting that there are more than 55 different nationalities in the IOC. Uh, so I'm curious about, I mean, your colleagues and their backgrounds. I believe each one of them has a certain degree of sports background, but if you can briefly tell us their backgrounds, uh, that would be great because I'm curious about it as a teacher's perspective, as a professor's perspective. I keep saying my students, doesn't matter American student or international students, you have to work with people. You have to work with people who have different background, different culture. So if you can tell us about the IOC and people's background, that'd be great. And my second question is there any good way to get internship? So if you know about that, I want to hear because after I hear from you, I want to share the information with my students. Honestly, yes.
Well, first of all, thank you for joining and taking the time and asking the question. Um, Look, from a background perspective, it's a natural result of the brand we are and the product itself, which is so universal. So backgrounds of people who work there obviously are related specifically to the departments and the skills that need them. So I'd say they're spread out, and one really cool thing about the IOC is that we're able to hire from anywhere in the world. So that's able, that gets people from everywhere applying, being excited about the opportunities, and just naturally fosters a lot of that. But of course, there's a lot of opportunity that emerges from people that have worked within the Olympic movement in different capacities. So I'd say the backgrounds are fairly specific to the roles that they do, but the way that they're able to come together is because it's an open, inclusive organization that's able to hire from all around the world. And as far as internships are concerned, I'm happy to ping the link here of the of the job sites that are there, and anytime that anyone sees opportunities, they should definitely look out for it.
Okay, I appreciate.
Yeah.
Aniyant, you can ask your question.
Thank you. Hi, Anish. Thanks for being here. My name is Neha Anand. I work in business analytics in the sports industry. Got a two-part question for you. One being, I know you spoke a little bit working in the digital side, but just from a IOC partnerships overall view, with kind of the uncertainty of fans and, how a lot of the partnership deals are based off of, how many eyeballs you can, get on their brand. What are some, and to the extent you can speak to it, what are some of the ways that you're approaching, make goods with some of these partners? Is it all digital based, or are there other kind of creative ways you've thought about make goods as a partnerships group as a whole? And then on a more selfish note, just curious on, is there any insight into like when there'll be a determination on fans and how that's going to look? Whether it'll be a reduced amount. Curious. I say it's a selfish question because my family has tickets for a couple events, so just curious.
Really? What do they have? What do they have tickets for, Neha?
I have to go through it, but I think badminton's on that list. A couple of the track events. There's about 5 to 10. I think that my dad had bought like 2 years ago at this point, 2-3 years ago at this point. So.
Wow. And what's the story behind that? Like, how do they end up choosing, like, badminton, or did it just like going to Tokyo?
I honestly don't know if it was simply like, hey, let's just go for what's available. But yeah, I'm looking at it. Got badminton, volleyball, beach volleyball. It's kind of a nice variety. So I think I was just looking for variety in the time slots that worked out. Yeah, I actually don't know too much about the origin, but my dad's obviously curious now on what the situation is and if he's going to go. And I'm it's a fluctuating situation, so there's not an easy answer to that. But to what at this point, I was just curious.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're curious. I wish I could tell you anything, but
yeah.
but I'm going to pass on this one.
What about is there a time frame in which you think that there will be more information available to the public?
I can't speak to that right now.
Got it. Okay, fair enough. All right. What about the first part, the make goods concept?
Yeah, I mean, like, look, I think anytime things are really specific to what I'm doing right now, of course there are just lots of things going on which I can't speak to specifically. I think just generally on the partnership side of things, what's definitely been exciting the last couple of years has been the range of things that you now have the opportunity to work on, right? Like, so one way I think about this world is that it allows you to be really, really creative, but also at the same time having to be thoughtful about a bunch of new mediums that have come up, right? So you're literally working in spaces sometimes as new as audio, or going back and forth between platforms that have been really established for a while. So I think what's most exciting in this space is just that every couple of years you have new interesting things to do. So I'll leave it at that.
Fair enough. Yeah, I know I threw some hard hitters at you which are tough to answer right now. So I appreciate it.
All good, Neha. I understand where you're coming from. If you have tickets to the game.
Yeah, I might follow up offline maybe.
Moniz, you can ask your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Anesh, for joining us, and Neha for setting this wonderful fireside chat up. My name is Monis, and I'm an MBA student. And Anesh, I can kind of relate. I spent the first 8 years of my career at Al Jazeera and ESPN. Before now, I'm studying brand strategy. So I was actually kind of curious because you worked in these, at Twitter and even at the IOC on sort of like a cutting edge role. And I was wondering, being in this type of role, entrepreneurial sort of experimental role, were there any strategies that you really efforted that failed to meet your expectations, or sort of initiatives that didn't work out the way that you wanted, and just what you learned from those types of experiences?
Yeah. Hey, thanks for asking the question, Monis. There have definitely been times when things haven't worked out, right? All across my career. And I think one of those, without going into the specifics of what it actually was I think I was trying to do I think I was trying too hard to do everything by myself, right? And sometimes that can be a policy because you have today the ability or just tools to be able to do a lot of things yourself, right? But you realize that depending on what the specifics of any project can be, a lot of times you just have to bring people along, build trust, take time, think through things. So I'd say that especially in the partnerships world, especially in worlds where you are almost a real-time translator between organizations, right? You're trying to map or match organizations that traditionally may or may not be speaking to each other and help each other meet mutually beneficial goals. Going at it alone for too long or trying to do everything by yourself may not work sometimes. Yeah. So that's just something that's coming to mind, especially as you're thinking about this. I do definitely think that there is a lot of your rewards come from like compounding, right? Like you're chipping away at things for a while to come, and you sometimes may even never see where the actual reward comes from, but you have to believe in it and build it out with a few people that you trust. Cool.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Sachin, you can ask your question.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the talk today, Anish. And my question is I'm a master's student here at the sports management department at Florida State in the US. And I'm someone who's like trying to get into the industry. And for someone with that aspect, I also want to explore industries not just within the US, but Europe and Asia, because I know countries like Singapore are becoming the next hub for like sports, international sports. So how do you feel like, or what is your opinion on like the job prospects for internationals in say Europe? And how is it like, is it more restricted? Because just from like what I've heard, it seems like getting that full-time position in Europe is a bit hard, but I don't know, since I have like two different backgrounds now, coming from India, being in the US, and now looking at Europe. So what is your thoughts on that, please?
Hey, thanks for the question, Sachin. I think you broke up a little bit at the end there, but I think I got the gist.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
okay.
Can you hear me
Yeah,
now?
I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So here's what I'd say, right? What you want to do is to like go after, what you're really sort of interested in. You feel like you have the right skills. And what I've realized, I mean, almost accidentally, is that every time I've done that, I've landed up with something totally unexpected, right? And so it's funny, right? Like life, how life plays out. You may want, you may know exactly what you want, and you could go after it, and you may actually end up landing that. But you probably also be kinder to yourself if you really put efforts into sort of looking at things that you definitely want to do, and then realizing that there's an opportunity sort of alongside that, and that comes down to whether you want to go to Europe or whether you want to go to Asia. At any given point you can say, yeah, well, there are opportunities available everywhere. How does that translate to what you specifically either have to offer, or someone that you built a relationship with who's willing to take a chance on you, or any of those other factors that could work out. It can be overwhelming, especially when you're trying to look at this entire world of opportunities and what you'd like to do next. So, maybe it's almost easier to like look at here are the top 10 things or places or people that I'd like do things with. Go after that and see what that sort of leads to. I'd say start with people if you can, right? Because those are some, those are some meaningful conversations that will hopefully last in relationships, whether you get the specific job or not, and you never know whether that's the one after. So yeah, I can't say specifically about whether one area of the world is harder to get in or not. It may just be very easy based on what you are specifically good at. But I guess if you look at people that you are really inspired by, or want to work with, or feel like you want to work with, and do your research and reach out, who knows?
Awesome. Thank you.
Udita, you're next. Do you want me to read your question? So the question was, how do you feel about Clubhouse, and how do you see this as a new platform from the perspective of Olympics and building up a direct conversation with fans?
Yeah, I'll speak to it from a personal perspective. I think that you know, really interesting to see how uh, live audio has emerged in the last, I guess, few months, even though it's been around in so many different formats. Um, Fun to dip into, right? Because you look at a lot of conversations that may be easier to start than they might have been before. And of course, there's a huge pool of content that I think you can experiment with to begin with. So very early days. I for sure have notifications on just to see what people are talking about, and can sometimes dip into it. So I think it still TBD to see how it plays out.
Navi, you can ask your question.
Perfect. Thanks, Devyani. Thank you, Anesh, for taking the time this afternoon, calling in from Toronto, Canada here. And thanks, Neha, for great moderation of the questions. So for myself, I was in the sports business sector, but and I was moving towards the non-for-profit side. And obviously due to COVID-19, circumstances did not line. As the sports sectors, I wouldn't say on a decline, but more on a pause at the moment, I pivoted into the tech sector. Loving the tech sector. I'm currently at an incubator for startup companies. We're the world's #1 university tech incubator. And I found that I'm loving it, but I want to implement sports. And so I'm looking to do that. And we're actually looking to launch something along those lines. And so my question falls around, in your experience right now, as you look to bring back these games and sports looks to come back to somewhat normal, we see more of an implementation in technology in sports. Is this something that we'll see in the foreseeable future, or is this just a temporary fix and everything will go back to organic and the normal fan engagement is what I'm looking for?
Got it. Naveed, great question. I wish I had a crystal ball to answer your question, or the expertise, honestly, to look at that and say exactly what it's going to look like. There are far smarter people, I guess, who are working on some of this, and I can't claim to know as much to answer that thoughtfully for you.
No problem. I was just looking to get your opinion to see. I know you're busy with partnerships, so I'm curious to see what's coming your way.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of things that are happening, which which are different to what we may have been doing, pre-pandemic. But still, so many things to play out that it's too early to talk about any of it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and thanks for taking the time.
Anesh, we're coming up at the hour mark here. I just want to be respectful of your time. We have a few more questions. Would you be able to stay on a bit longer to answer?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
Okay, great.
Pratish, you can ask your question.
Thank you, Devyani. Hey, Anish, thanks for sharing all the insights, and thank you, Neha, for setting this up. It was really insightful. So my question to you, Anish, is while you mentioned about pivoting your journey, while you were changing companies, or let's say you are taking up an adventure as to whenever you are prospecting a new job organization, how do you I'm assuming sometimes it might get difficult or overwhelming to gauge whether that decision might work for you in your favor or not, though you have the liberty you like to take that adventure, as you mentioned it earlier. Like how do you used to handle that and approach that, like one being that, and secondly someone who is have an experience in an ad tech industry for about 3 to 4 years is trying to pivot his journey into sports industry. Like what would your advice be on for that person? Like I'm talking about myself. Yeah, you got that.
I figured it. Yeah, great question, Pratish. I think it's definitely a challenge of our times, right? Like the fact that opportunities could be in different places, in different industries, and having uh, the energy or the risk taking ability sometimes to move, and believing in the fact that you can do it. I think some of it comes down to the basics, right? Like if you're hopefully in a in a good place personally, if you're potentially stable financially in some situations, it makes it easier to make that jump, right? So that's definitely a consideration, right? Like I don't think any risk is taken without a multitude of factors being considered. But I can say that that's something you can aspire to do irrespective of like what industry you work in, right? So having some of those foundations in place definitely helps to take those risks. Like personally for me, it was just the fact that I was in positions in life where um, I didn't have to worry about taking the risk as much as a lot of other people would have to, or you just have like a supportive base around you, whether it's family or friends, like that can egg you on, because you have the belief for yourself, but you can definitely ride on the coattails of others' beliefs in you as well. Specifically to your question about pivoting to the industry, it really depends on what you want to do, right? Ideally, ideally you pivot to things that you're already really good at, and then you can jump from there, because the I think the other big thing about being in the sports industry or any related industry which has so much excitement from so many people to be part of the industry is that you never want to undervalue yourself, right? You still want to be able to do things that make sense, and that you can jump to a bigger platform on. So I don't know if you have you know ad tech roles in what I'd call allied industries as a way to get started, or whether you're willing to completely do a fresh start depending on your personal situation, and moving out. So I'd say those are the two things. If you have a really strong foundation, then go for it, right? You have the ability to take a lot more risks than you need to be thinking about. If you want to layer that up, then look for an opportunity where you can still be valued, and make that move over a period of time.
Got it. I just have one follow-up question if I can quickly ask. Um, yeah. So like someone from like someone like you from your role, let's say if I'm trying to not exactly copy your journey, but yeah, if that is something which I admire to do, like to be in your position few years down the line, like what are few of those skill sets would you like recommend I need to work on maybe? Yeah, that's about it. If you could answer that.
uh, I guess like varied range of skill sets, right? Like fundamentally uh, you want to have the skills that you're looking to go for in a particular area, allied with the relationships that you build in that space, right? It's a combination of sort of the hard skills and the soft skills that hopefully get you to where you want to. But also equally, I'd say that look, a lot of our dream roles are probably not even they haven't even been invented yet, right? I can think back, especially the time when you wanted to get into the industry, or I wanted to get into the industry. There was like no such thing as a social network or a tech platform or any of these things that even existed. So I think we're in a really exciting time where 3 years down the line, there may be something that opens up that that you didn't even think was possible, and maybe that's where you want to go, because ideally it's your own story, your own growth, and you don't want to necessarily follow just what's already out there in the industry.
Got it. Thank you so much for your. Yeah, thank you.
Anish, we just have one last question from
Sure.
Arjit. You can ask a question.
Yeah, Anish, I'm here again, your fan. So I just want to ask you one question, and maybe this question being like everyone should have asked you, not in this session or maybe in different sessions where you have attended. So the question is like how it was so difficult, like what difficulties you faced when you transact when this pandemic happened from Tokyo 2020 to Tokyo 2021. So what are the difficulties like in terms of handling the stakeholders and the sponsorships and all? So it's been your getting a thing from a delegate from IOC. It's like I was urging to hear this.
Great question, Arjit. Unfortunately, I'd prefer to leave my specific work conversations out of this, but I appreciate your interest.
Yeah, please. So I asked this question because I'm studying here in UK in Loughborough University Sports Management. This is one of the module I'm working on. So I just want to hear from you.
I understand. I'm sure there's a lot of great public material out there that you can build your inferences from. I can't speak to them obviously at this point in time.
Yeah, it's fine. Thank you.
All right, we're going to wrap up. Thank you so much, Anish, for spending the time with us today. It was really inspiring. I think, anytime we kind of put together these events and get a South Asian who's, at the helm of an organization or, has kind of made it through, it's very exciting and it's very inspiring for us. So thank you for sharing your time and your wisdom with us today. I hope everyone else enjoyed this. Sorry if we didn't get to ask your question, but, we're on LinkedIn. We have that group chat. I think Anesh is part of that as well. So, if you have questions, go ahead and ask. Now you've met him. We know the man now. So, don't be afraid to reach out. With that, I just wanted to say that, this organization exists and thrives because of the people, members, but also people giving back their time and their skills. So wanted to say thank you so much to Anish, also to our team members, Divya and Divyani, for helping us put this together. We have other members as well who are helping us day-to-day, social media, events, partnerships. And I think that's what makes this group so powerful. I really hope, I think for me personally, I really hope to see more and more South Asians enter into sports. And I really feel like we have a lot of the assets that Anish touched upon today to really thrive in this industry. And I hope that today's chat kind of inspired you to keep pushing, even though we're in such a really horrible time, for the whole world. But I really hope that this kind of lifted your spirits and allowed you to keep pushing. So thanks everyone. Anish, thank you again. And we'll see you online.
Thanks so much, Neha. Bye everyone. See ya.